Good morning, everybody. It is a great pleasure for me, on behalf of Norwegian School of Sport Sciences, to welcome you all to this trial lecture in partial fulfillment of the requirements of the award of Doctor of Philosophy, PhD, in Sport Science. My name is Lars Tore Rongland. I am rector at Norwegian School of Sport Sciences, and I will share the two sessions here today. In particular, I would like to welcome the members of the examination committee. Associate Professor Christian Thue Bjørndal, Norwegian School of Sport Sciences, Chair. Professor Fabien Aall, University of Lausanne, first opponent. Professor Aall is joining us online. Professor Anne Kjøndal, Nord Universitet, second opponent. Furthermore, I welcome the candidate, Anette Skilbred, who now will give the following lecture: Challenges and Possibilities for Youth Well-being and Academic Performance in the Context of Norwegian Elite Sport. Indeed, over to you, Anette.
Can you hear me? Hvis jeg får den på plass også da. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. The trial lecture that I got from the committee read as follows: Challenges and Possibilities for Youth Well-being and Academic Performance in the Context of Norwegian Elite Sport. I find the topic intriguing, and I see it as an opportunity to explore and shed light on the tensions within the context of youth elite sport. In order to do that, I propose the following outline of the lecture. First, I will operationalize and delineate the context of focus. Second, I will define and focus the key terms, well-being and academic performance. Thirdly, I will describe and discuss the challenges and possibilities for youth's well-being. And fourthly, I will describe and discuss the challenges and possibilities for youth athletes' academic performance. Finally, I will share some final reflections. When considering the context and discussing opportunities and challenges related to well-being and academic performance, narrowing down to Norwegian sports schools seem relevant and appropriate. As the number of sports schools continues to grow, an increasing number of ambitious athletes are enrolling in these institutions to pursue their passion for sport. Consequently, more youths will establish their educational foundations in these types of schools. While these schools emphasize a clear focus on sport, it is crucial to ensure that academic achievements and well-being of students remain equally prioritized and valued. These aspects are central in the sports school context. Athletes' well-being and their academic performance are a focus area for the schools, as they want to play a central role in shaping the holistic development and success of youth athletes. Well-being in this particular context is used synonymously with the holistic athlete, holistic human, and the school develops strategies in order to create environments for the athletes to develop in the sport and academic domain and maintain a balanced lifestyle. The sports school context has gotten increasingly research attention the last 10 years. In a review by Anderson on sports schools research in Europe from 1999 to 2021, a total of 55 studies were found. Notably, 44 of these studies are published from 2015 onwards. This review also demonstrates the strong focus on this context in the Nordic countries, with 28 studies. Although there are significant differences in educational systems, the schools have some central common characteristics. They accommodate many high-level athletic students and have a systematic and flexible approach to assisting young elite athletes in pursuing their education while also training and competing. In 2022, Thompson and colleagues published another relevant literature review on sports schools. Their review focuses especially on holistic athlete development. Both reviews offer valuable literature of topics under discussion today. In total, the review holds 14 studies that explore topics related to well-being and academic performance within a Norwegian context, each focusing on the themes with varying specificity. Therefore, when I later describe and discuss the challenges and possibilities, I will mainly draw on these studies, supplemented by recent research in the field, including my own findings. And additionally, to enrich the discussion further, I will incorporate research from similar contexts and other countries as well. Before delving into the challenges and possibilities, I will describe and focus the two key aspects, well-being and academic performance. While I recognize the strong connection between well-being and academic performance, it's important to note that studies on sports schools do not always examine both aspects simultaneously. First, presenting challenges and possibilities related to well-being, followed by those related to academic performance, will allow for a more accessible presentation and discussion of the respective impacts. Also, in the closing of the lecture, I will return to the connection between the two. Well-being, a word that has many synonyms and associations. World Health Organization defined well-being as a positive state experienced by individuals and societies. Similar to health, it is a resource for daily life and is determined by social, economic, and environmental conditions. Well-being encompasses quality of life and the ability of people and societies to contribute to the world with a sense of meaning and purpose. Recognizing the necessity for a context-specific approach to the concept of well-being, it is crucial to shift from a broad understanding as defined by the World Health Organization to a more context-sensitive definition. This does not diminish the relevance of the overall definition for youth athletes who have the same universal needs for physical, mental, and social health as everyone else. However, the specific demands and expectations placed on athletes shape their experiences of well-being within these contexts. In the context of sport school, athletes' well-being is conceptualized under various terms such as holistic athlete development, holistic health, holistic facilitation, and the concept of balance. Holistic athlete development integrates physical training with mental and emotional support, ensuring that athletes are not only performing at their best, but also maintaining overall well-being. An important element in this regard is the school's specific focus on integration of rigorous athletic training and competition with comprehensible educational pursuits. This dual objective of the sports school has been labeled dual career pursuits. And overall, the dual career can be described as balancing athletic training and competition with educational endeavors, aiming to achieve success and fulfillment in both areas. The dual career notion highlights the close link between well-being and academic performance in the sports school context. By creating environments where athletes can balance their sport and academic commitments, schools aim to ensure overall well-being. Now I will move on to the next key aspect, academic performance. Building on the dual career concept, I will provide more details about what it entails and how it is managed in the schools. Academic performance refers to the overall educational achievements of students, typically measured through grades, test scores, and other assessments. In secondary schools, academic performance involves navigating more advanced coursework. Students are expected to balance their studies with personal commitments, develop time management skills, and engage in independent learning. In the more focused context of sports schools, where the integration of academic and athletic development is more pronounced, students face the challenges of excelling in both areas. These institutions provide specialized programs that offer flexible schedules, dedicated sport support systems, and resources designed to optimize both academic and athletic performance. Stambulova and Willmann conducted a review of European dual career research from 2015 to 2018. The review comprised 42 studies, including 18 from the Nordic countries, highlighting the relevance of this context and the specific focus on dual careers. The authors suggest that dual career research has been context sensitive from the outset, taking into account the difference between dual career systems in various countries. They argue that there is a growing trend of heightened interest in studying athletes' significant others, such as coaches, teachers, parents, peers, and support staff members, and their perspectives on dual careers or dual career support. When it comes to student athletes' academic performance that are explicitly measurable in terms of grades compared to non-athlete students, the literature I have found present contradictory results. Some studies suggest that the sports students are generally high achievers and outperform youths from regular schools. Conversely, other studies indicate the opposite trend, where youths from regular secondary schools perform better academically than student athletes. In the literature from Norway, in the Norwegian context, I could not find studies that have compared grades of students at the sports school compared to regular schools. However, what is more relevant is research that can inform a discussion of the challenges and possibilities for academic performance, which I will come back to. First, I will discuss the challenges and possibilities for youth well-being. And although the picture is complex and these aspects often represent nuanced perspectives, I will present the challenges and possibilities consecutively. I will start with the factors that can challenge both the physical and mental well-being of youth athletes, focusing on injuries, stress and concern, and burnout. From the Norwegian pool of studies in the sports school context, there are several studies that have looked into injuries. In a study by Bjørndal and colleagues, they explored how much and how often Norwegian youth elite handball players trained and played matches during one competitive season. 205 handball players trained and played matches. 205 handball players aged 15 to 18 years were asked about their types of activities, frequency, perceived exertion, and the duration of training and matches. They also weekly reported their injury and illness data. And the results show that 53% of the players experienced injuries every week, and 38 of these injuries were considered serious. Another study has explored injuries among athletes that were newly enrolled at sports school. Måseid and colleagues investigated whether athletes who were among the least fit at the time of enrollment faced an increased risk of injury over a 26-week period. In general, the findings report a high number of injuries, with a total of 156 overuse injuries, 146 acute injuries, and 294 increase of illness, meaning each athlete experienced an average of 3.6 health issues over a 26-week period. However, athletes less fit had no increased risk of being injured, although many had a rapid training load increase when starting in the sports school. Several studies has looked into stress and concern among youths at sports schools. For instance, Berntsen and Christiansen has looked into how coach-athlete dynamic can be a source of stress for athletes. They interviewed athletes and coaches and aimed to capture athletes' main purpose for participating in sport. The athletes were grouped into two categories based on their purpose of participating in sport. Either the aim of sport participation is having fun, or the aim of sport participation is development. The results showed a mismatch between athletes that participate for fun and their coaches' ideas of participation. This mismatch became more challenging when athletes who simply want to have fun encountered coaches who prioritize hard work. This disconnect was associated with dissatisfaction, poor performance, and lower overall well-being for some athletes. When it comes to burnout, there has very recently been published a report investigating burnout among 642 athletes at lower secondary sports schools. Saarinen and colleagues specifically investigated the association between gender, grade, sport type, and problematic scores on school burnout, sport burnout, self-esteem, and psychological distress. Their findings show that athletes experience high levels of burnout related to school. They also found that female student athletes were more likely to report high levels of burnout, specifically related to sport. Furthermore, older students tended to experience more severe burnout, impacting their academic and athletic pursuits. If we look to Finland, there are several studies from the upper secondary sports school context. Surkila and colleagues have conducted several quantitative studies on burnout, and there are especially two of their findings that I found interesting regarding the dual career and well-being. Particularly burnout are related. First, high success expectations is one domain. High success expectations in one domain increase the risk of burnout in the other domain. This means that high expectations in the school domain increase the risk of burnout in the sport domain. And second, school-related exhaustion at the beginning of upper secondary school predicted sport-related exhaustion at the end of the school year. When I looked into the sports school reviews, more recent papers, and the literature beyond Norway, I found less studies explicit exploring well-being among youths at the sports schools. There are studies that explore and balance both well-being and inhibiting well-being, both enhancing well-being and inhibiting well-being. But to my knowledge, I could not find studies that explicitly focus on what well-being means to this group in this context. I especially researched the topic community and belonging because many of the athletes I interviewed emphasized the benefits and ease of spending everyday life with youths who have the same habits and routines. Many of the athletes who have moved away from home express that it is easier to maintain their routines at the sports schools compared to when they are back home with friends outside sport. Based on my interview, it is my interpretation that being in an environment where there are like-minded people that organize and schedule their days in a similar manner makes everyday life smoother. Being mirrored by peers that sees the same things as meaningful seems to have a positive impact on the well-being. As I said in the beginning, I could not find peer review articles that explore this topic in sports schools in Norway or the Nordic countries. However, I found a thesis for the professional degree in psychology at the University of Oslo from 2019 that explored 8 youths' experience with being in an elite sport milieu in Norway. The research identified a lack of qualitative analysis of the experience of being both a developing youth and an aspiring athlete in high-performance sports community. One of their main findings was athletes' experience of being in a community that understands and offers support. They describe the other athletes as like-minded that constitute a unique source of support and understanding. These findings and accounts from youth athletes resonate closely with my own findings and mirror what athletes in my interview expressed. There is my interpretation that this source of support and understanding very much contribute to athletes' everyday well-being. Although much literature suggests that a narrow identity related to sport can be vulnerable, athletes in my interview emphasize an important and supplementary aspect to the identity experience in sport community. Their shared focus on sport, similar routines, and common future goals create a community that facilitates well-being for the athletes. One aspect that the research has shed light on is the positive benefits from support systems. For example, Christiansen and Stensrud conducted a longitudinal study that explored youth's psychological and physical adaptation over 3 years in a sports school context. Athletes shared answers related to coping with stress, injuries, body composition, training volume, and sleep. The findings show that supportive parents play a key role in reducing stress and promoting well-being. Further, athletes with parents who had sport knowledge and therefore knew when to intervene was truly beneficial. And athletes who dropped out lacked similar support. The last point I want to include in possibilities for well-being is related to perfectionism, and is, for me, somewhat surprising. Stornes and colleagues have explored perfectionism among youth aged 13 to 14 years old, attending regular or elite sport performance-focused secondary schools. They aim to explore how different types of perfectionism affect youth's psychological well-being. The study revealed lower levels of problematic perfectionism among athletes in high-performance settings compared to those attending regular schools. Specifically, at regular schools, 39.3 and 36.4 boys reported high perfectionist concerns. In contrast, in elite schools, these numbers were lower with 25.6 for the girls and 19 for the boys. This indicates that athletes have lower levels of the type of perfectionism that is related to high anxiety and depression, which is noteworthy given the rigorous high-performance environment in which these athletes operate. The authors suggest that contextual factors and the selection of studies may plausibly explain why many young girls and boys from elite school set high personal standards, but do not often doubt their performance or feel pressured by external expectations. Summary and reflection of the well-being literature. Having reviewed a share of the Norwegian and Nordic sports school literature that shed light on well-being, I want to share some reflections. The research points to several aspects that can jeopardize athletes' well-being, such as experiencing various types of stress, including competition-related stress, balancing academic commitments with sport, and personal stresses such as social life and injuries. Burnout research demonstrates how interaction between the academic and athletic domain affect overall well-being. And this underscores the need for a comprehensive understanding of burnout and stress across different contexts and domains to effectively support student athletes' overall well-being. To my knowledge, there is a lack of studies that explores these young athletes' broader sense of well-being when it comes to being in the sport. Although many of the studies that look into the challenges also point to what we can do to lower risk and work preventative, I did not find any studies in the reviews that explore explicit well-being qualities. Existing research has placed significant emphasis on the ill-being experienced by these athletes, addressing various aspects such as mental health challenges, burnout and stress, and efforts have been directed towards understanding these issues and prevent them, and in that sense, increase well-being. Now we will move on to challenges and possibilities for youth academic performance, starting with the challenges. As I outlined in the introduction, academic performance in the context of sports schools often intervenes with dual career considerations, which is also reflected in the research. I will shed light on various aspects related to dual career demands, such as issues related to organizational stress, expectations, and search for the optimal balance. There are several studies from the Norwegian context that has explored the dual career environments and the potential negative consequences that this double commitment can have. A study that has looked into the organizational stress is Christiansen. She explored how young athletes balance academic studies and sport when participating in international competition. Athletes 15 to 18 years old was asked open-ended questions related to competition and their role as a student athlete. The findings show that the dual career can become an organizational stressor for these young athletes, and that schoolwork in some cases can become an interference during competitions. This highlights that balancing sport and academic responsibilities can be a challenging balancing act for young student athletes. Another study has looked into the organization of dual career are Christiansen and Julian. They interviewed several stakeholders, including the athletes and their parents, about the various roles that the different stakeholders in the context have. Several of the parents raised concern related to inadequate dual career management of young athletes outside the sports school system. The parents particularly emphasized concerns about tensions between sports schools and federations regarding how athletes balance their educational and athletic goals. Stornes and colleagues has looked into athletes' experience of expectations in the dual career environment. Stornes and colleagues interviewed student athletes and other high-performance students about expectations to oneself and from others. Their findings show the students' constant focus on progress and future opportunities made it hard to prioritize and lower expectations when necessary. Also, although the athletes understand the importance of rest and recovery for their health and performance, prioritizing remained challenging for most of them. As the study highlights, the dual career focuses athletes to prioritize, and finding the optimal balance has been shown to be challenging for them. A Swedish study has looked into the search for optimal balance in dual career environments. Stambulova and colleagues surveyed and interviewed 16-year-old student athletes about their dual careers and how to maintain a balance. Their findings show that a constant equal focus on both and sports studies was impossible without compromising their private life, health, and well-being. The findings also shed light on how these negotiations can be expressed. For example, prioritizing the athlete role was more relevant for athletes from sports where athletes could have a professional career, and prioritizing studies were more typical to athletes from sport with low professionalization. If we look to the Danish literature, Skruppeltrang and colleagues conducted an ethnographic study of 4 sports schools with observation and interviews. Their findings suggest that there is a code of conduct requiring athletes to commit to working hard both as athletes and students. And the authors argue that the hybrid system directs athletes to follow an ambitious, narrow developmental track focused on excelling in both sports and academics. And they further suggest that this dual commitment is threatened when students prioritize either sports or academics. Possibilities for academic performance. As described under the challenges, there are certain demands associated with juggling the dual career tracks for the athletes. On the other hand, these environments and schools offer an alternative to youths that would like to pursue both their athletic and academic aspiration simultaneously. These programs are designed to provide a structured support system that helps student athletes balance their training schedules with their educational commitments. By integrating flexible learning options and personal adjustments, schools aim to help young athletes to perform in both arenas with compromising on either. This dual career environments are intervened with the holistic development philosophy, which have the students' needs and welfare in their focus. I will look into aspects in the dual career that creates opportunities, such as coordination and communication, enabling several dimensions in athletes' identity, and mindfulness. Henriksen and colleagues' study shed light on how coordination and communication can optimize the dual career environments for athletes. They observed daily life through interviews and observation in a kayak environment. And their findings show that the athletes experienced an integrated set of pulls, which they attributed to good coordination and communication among different actors in the environment. This integrated and coordinated support system allowed the athletes to navigate their dual career paths more effectively, reducing stress and enhancing their overall performance in both academic and athletic pursuits. Another aspect the athletes in Henriksen and colleagues' study emphasized was the environment's facilitation of having and nurturing several dimensions in their identity. The athletes described it as positive to be in an environment that allowed athletes to maintain personal identities beyond their athletic role, such as being a student, but also a friend or a mentor for a younger athlete. The study showed that the environment managed to encourage the athletes to cultivate skills applicable not only in sports, but also in the broader aspects of life. Moon and colleagues explored the impact of mindfulness on stress, perceived performance in school and sport, and on athlete burnout. Moon and colleagues collected surveys from 382 athletes concerning their degree of mindfulness, perceived stress, and their satisfaction with progress in sports school. The results show that those with a higher degree of mindfulness attention experienced improvement in their perceived performance in both sports and academics. In addition, they experienced less stress and burnout. These findings suggest that practicing mindfulness and other meditative activities can be readily accessible strategies for athletes managing dual career demands. And last, Christiansen's study emphasized the benefits of flexibility in the dual career environments. Her research shows the importance of flexibility, highlighting that schools' adjustments to the workload to fit the needs of student athletes are essential for helping them manage their dual commitments. In addition, the athletes emphasized the critical role of supportive parents in their management of dual career pursuits. So some reflections of the literature in academic performance. My reflection after having read a part of the dual career literature is that, broadly speaking, there are two main areas of focus in the research field. One broad approach is focused on developing frameworks and interventions that support the holistic development of student athletes, including their academic and athletic endeavors. Their emphasis is on enhancing sports structures and integrating academic and athletic pursuits effectively for student athletes. The other broad approach is focused on the challenges and stressors faced by the student athletes in balancing their academic and athletic responsibilities. They often investigate factors influencing athletes' time management, stressors, psychological well-being, and overall dual career experiences. However, many of the studies are somewhere in between and penned between shedding light on the challenges as well as exploring and suggesting how to better construct the dual career environments to ensure student athletes' welfare. Finally, I will reflect on four aspects, the research findings, 4 aspects. 1, the research findings and suggested strategies. 2, the tension of sports schools' dual objectives. 3, conditions external to the school context. And 4, proposed priority for sports schools. First, the existing literature points to several challenges regarding youth's well-being and academic performance in high-performance environments. There are sport-related adversities, such as handling a high physical load, balancing training sessions at schools and with clubs, dealing with injuries, and avoiding burnout. Additionally, there are academic obstacles, including prioritizing tasks and managing expectations. To address these challenges, existing research suggests several strategies to enhance both well-being and academic performance. For instance, creating well-structured and coordinated environments that effectively manage total workload while offering flexibility. Some researchers advocate for prioritizing either academic or athletic focus based on current needs, highlighting the benefits of alternating emphasis as necessary. However, this approach can ultimately create a challenging search for the optimal balance for the athletes. And therefore, there is no simple answer to how the delicate equilibrium between sports, academics, and well-being should be maintained. Second, as I mentioned in the introduction, holistic development is one of the core goals of these schools, aiming to accommodate the challenges discussed. However, as we have seen, balancing the dual objective of nurturing medal-winning athletes and fostering holistic development is a daunting task. The misalignment in values inherent to these dual goals seems to complicate their integration. These objectives reflect the overarching philosophy in Norwegian lead sport: to produce international champions while nurturing well-rounded individuals. And while there is potential to achieve both aims, their divergent values and priorities present both challenges and opportunities. Thirdly, when considering sports schools in this broader context and based on my brief overview, it appears that in many cases, student athletes are shaped by conditions similar to other youths. Similar structures and conditions shape athletes' lives. For example, factors such as socioeconomic background, supportive and resourceful parents, and resilience can either facilitate or hinder athletes in reaching their goals. And lastly, based on the reviewed research, well-being and academic performance are deeply intertwined. However, it is essential to recognize that academic achievement does not necessarily equal well-being. And more precisely, good academic performance does not always provide accurate insights into athletes' well-being. And moreover, if we consider the World Health Organization's definition of well-being, which describe well-being as a resource for life and emphasizes the ability of people to contribute to the world with a sense of meaning and purpose, this strongly suggests that the sports school should prioritize athletes' well-being. And by doing so, both academic and athletic performance are more likely to thrive as a result. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the candidate for the trial lecture. We have some minutes left before I close the session, so it's time to invite the opponents to ask the candidate a question or two related to the trial lecture. So we start with the first opponent, Professor Fabien Hall, please.
Hello. Thank you very much for your presentation, Annette. It was very clear, very interesting, and I was interested by your last comment on the socioeconomic background and the parents' resources, because you mentioned a lot of factors such as stress, burnout, interaction within the specific context. And we also have, and I liked your comment that also that performances doesn't mean that even if it's in academic and sport or both, doesn't mean that the experience of the athletes are called good experiences, and that means well-being. And I was wondering if there's not a gap in the literature, because in literature in sociology of education, there's a lot of research on the effect of socioeconomic background and parent resources, especially parents' cultural capital on the success in the academia. And so if you want to have a double career, maybe it plays also a role if you're from a socioeconomic background with a high cultural capital, it's much easier to success, at least at the academic level. But in this school, you also have another process that you may also have parents with a high, I would say, a sport capital, meaning a kind of knowledge in sport, experience in sport that can help also in the success in a sporting career. And I wonder if there are some research in Norway on that, and if you think that the very interesting points you mentioned, stress, difficulties the students may face, are connected also to this background. Because most of the literature you quoted is more on psychological aspects or psychosocial aspects of this career and these experiences, quite connected to identity and so on. But the resources, parent resources, are not so highlighted in the research.
Yeah. So if I interpret you right, you're asking about what parents' role is in this, either as a supportive system or as with their socioeconomic background.
Yeah, and their own resources, both in cultural resources in the academia, and in their education, and in sport. Does it play a role?
Yeah, from the literature I've read these two last week, there are especially two publications that come to mind, and one of them is it's from Denmark with Skrubbeltang and colleagues who have done these ethnographic studies at different sports schools, which emphasize the point that the socioeconomic background of the parents play a key role. I didn't dive into if it is the socio-economic background that do maybe play into the selection of who are the students that go to these schools, or if it's they bring in athletes that come from resourceful homes, and that's why maybe they also, it's two-sided. Both they can deal with the expectations because of support from the family, but also that they come with this background, and with the support. And the other study that I think about when you say support system is the Christiansen, I can't remember if it was any co-authors about the parents who had not only resourceful parents, but also the parents who had sport knowledge. So they knew when to intervene with coaches and teachers, and that was really helpful. And that made changes to the athletes' everyday life that athletes who dropped out of the school didn't have. Yeah. If that was an answer to your question.
You think maybe it's also an environment that is very homogeneous? Are there huge differences between the students in this most of the schools, or is that already a selection process, which means that if the population is homogeneous, these factors may not make a lot of differences?
Yeah, I think so, and especially I haven't, most of the research that I've looked into from the Norwegian context are from also private elite upper secondary sports schools, meaning they are a bit more expensive also as the public versions of these sports schools. And that's another aspect that plays in when it comes to a high socioeconomic background. So yeah, I think absolutely there is a selection of who these students are, and that could also be explained to why they actually have less perfectionistic concerns compared to students from regular sports schools, because they can deal with the self-selection. These people here will manage the stress.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Second opponent, Professor Anette Skilbred, a short question.
This is on, yeah. Thank you, Anette, for a wonderful trial lecture. One thing that surprised me, especially in regards to well-being, is social media and digital spaces. Certainly in newspapers and in public opinions, there's a lot of focus on how the digital environments and social media impact well-being of youth. Did you not find any literature on that in this context? And if there were no literature, now that you have interviewed these young athletes, can you share some reflections from your data or from your experiences as a researcher, how digital spaces and social media may impact well-being and perhaps also academic performance for these youth?
Yeah. Why I haven't touched upon it could be that the two reviews that I used mostly looked into sports schools research for a period of time, that maybe there has been so much emphasis, and especially the holistic development. So that could be a selection in the reviews that was a topic that wasn't discussed. If I were to bring up my interviews, which I will talk about later, in paper 2, when I have the internet is one actor, one source of information. They, for me, they are like quite critical about using internet as a source for knowledge and information, and so that if it is a national athlete, they will believe what they're saying. This relates especially to the nutritional supplements, in my case. And then with influencers, they're very skeptical, but because they have like they have other intentions, maybe just getting paid. But we didn't go into. I don't know if I have in my data their accounts about how internet affects their well-being and academic performance. No, not that much, but yeah. Then it's tempting to say that since they are similar to other youths in so many ways, affected by these external conditions outside sports schools, I guess these also are influenced by this in the same way, but I don't think my data can say so much about that. No.
we'll have to discuss that at a later point in time, but
we will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, thank you to the candidate for her lecture. I invite everybody to return to this auditorium at 1 p.m. Provided that the examination committee finds the trial lecture acceptable, the candidate will then defend her thesis, Young Athletes and Performance Enhancement, a Social Constructivist Perspective. Thank you.